Hi everybody, good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are around the world. Welcome to the MSF Holland General Assembly of 2020. We're in a very unprecedented times and we have a first for a virtual GA for MSF Holland. We've had fantastic pre-GA events and many of you have watched, and we're really trying to make the most out of this General Assembly and give you the feeling that this is an assembly. We really tried our best. We're all a bit nervous. We hope it's all going to work today, but please watch us online. Please give us your input. Thank you for voting already. Please listen and vote and be part of the MSF we want to become. Thank you.
Hi everyone and welcome at the 2020 General Assembly of the MSF Holland Association. My name is Margriet, I'm the assistant to the board and I will be hosting this session for you. And before we start, let me briefly make some technical remarks, because if you are watching now, that means you've found your way to YouTube, which is great in itself, so thank you so much for joining. But if you are, however, experiencing any technical issues now or during the live stream, then please send us an email and the association team will be ready to handle any questions that you may have. And again, if you have any questions, then you can also put them in the YouTube chat. Do make sure you're logged in with the YouTube account, and you can find the chat on the right side of your screen. And as with the pre-GA events, your input is incredibly valuable for this event. Even though we cannot all be here together in person today, we really hope to connect with you via the live stream. So please, really, any questions, just put them in the chat and we will make sure to answer them during the Q&A later in this G&A session. And that also brings me to the agenda for today. So we will have the GA pop-up, or the agenda pop-up up your screen right now. You've also received this agenda in your email a couple of weeks ago, so hopefully you already know what's going to happen. But we will just walk through once more and tell you what's going to happen in the next 2.5 hours. So we have a very interesting program for you. And what we'll do is we will start with a brief introduction of the MSF Holland board. Your board members, tell you who they are and what they are doing. Then we will introduce the GA committees to you, the voting and the motions committee, and we will briefly also mention the association committee. After that, we have the board elections, because hopefully, as you know by now, the board has 2 vacancies open and we have 3 candidates, and they will briefly introduce themselves to you and explain to you why they think they deserve your vote. So more on that later. After that, we have the report morale by our president, Marit van Lente, and she will look back at the previous year. After the report morale, at 10:55, we have a short break, a 15-minute break, so you have a time to stretch your legs and grab a coffee. But please do make sure to keep an eye on the live stream, because we have a little surprise for you there, and you definitely don't want to miss it, so keep an eye on the live stream. Then at 11:10, we come back for the GA, and then we have our treasurer, Michel Farkas, explain the financial statements of the past year. Right after his presentations, we have invited our general director, Nelke Manders, and our delegate director, Martje van Nes, to give us their take on the previous year. We also scheduled a brief Q&A moment with them, so if you have any questions that are specifically directed to the executive, to our general and delegate director, then please put them in the chat and we'll have them ready here to answer all your questions. Then at 12 o'clock, almost towards the end of the GA, we have the Q&A session with the board. We'll have the board ready here to answer all your questions, and we'll have 30 minutes for that, so I hope that's long enough to answer any questions that you may have. That means we will close the GA at 12:30, giving you half an hour more to cast your vote. And that also brings me to the voting procedure, because hopefully, as you know by now, the voting will be cast 100% online this year. We already opened the voting past Tuesday, so it has been open for a couple of days. And over the past few weeks, you've received several emails to log in to your e-voting account and test it already. So perhaps you have already cast your vote, and if not, you can do so today until 1 p.m. If you are again experiencing any technical issues with the e-voting system, then please contact us as soon as possible, and we will have again the association team ready to sort everything out. But please do so as soon as possible, because we do want to have all the votes in by 1 p.m. If you are logged into the system, then you will see 5 ballots, 5 voting ballots. And the first 4 ballots are the board motions. And the board motions are the matters on which the MSF Holland boards request the opinion of the MSF Holland members. So very important. And you're asked to vote upon 4 issues. The first one being the approval of the GA report of 2019, so of the previous GA. The second one being the approval of or the adoption, I should say, of the OCA Strategic Plan 2020-23, which we already discussed here in a pre-GA session. The third ballot is the appointment of PwC as our external auditor for 2020. And the fourth and final board motion is the approval of the accountability and financial statements 2019. And by approving those final statements, you also discharge the board of any liability of their management from the past financial year. So that is also good to know. The fifth and final ballot for this year's voting, those are the board elections, but there's much more to come on that during this GA. So those are all the technical issues. I hope you are by now all well prepared to participate in this GA, and I hope that the pre-GA sessions have helped you to better prepare and ask your questions before the GA. But again, we really hope that we have your questions coming in and that you participate during this live stream. And that brings me to the first agenda of this GA, because I have the honor to introduce the MSF Holland board to you. They are sitting right across from me. I can see them from my chair here. So we will now switch over to them. You can also see them on the screen. And what I'll do is I will introduce all of them to you. They will just quickly wave when I state their name. And I will explain to you who they are, how long they've been on the board, and what their role is on the board. So when I'm looking at the screen, I can see that your treasurer, Michel Farkas, is sitting all the way at the top. He's waving right now, which is great. So as I mentioned, Michel has been our treasurer of MSF Holland and has been a board member since 2018. Michel is also the chair of the Audit and Risk Committee and the MSF Holland Audit Committee, which have their meetings together. And Michel is also a member of the Remuneration Committee, so a very busy board member. Then on the right side of Michel, we have Annemarie Duinstee. Annemarie has also been a board member since 2018, and she is also the chair of the Remuneration Committee. Since last December, she's also a member of the OCA Duty and Care Committee, which is good to know. Then we go back and then we go to the left again, and there we have our third board member, which is Noor Cornelissen. Noor was elected last year as a board member at the 2019 GA, you may remember. And she has since been our IGA representative and a member of the OCA Association Committee. Then right of Noor, we have Riekje Elema. Riekje was also elected at the 2019 GA of last year, and she has since been a member of the OCA Council and a member of the OCA Medical Committee. Then right to Riekje, we have Hans, who we can already see in the bottom right of the screen. Hans Stolk, also elected at the 2019 GA. Hans is a member of also the Remuneration Committee. So we have 3 board members in the Remuneration Committee. Then we'll go over to the left side, and then there we have Tessa Tiadens. Tessa has been a board member since 2017, so for quite a while already. And she is both the chair of the Association Committee, the ASCO, and our representative at the IGA together with Noor. Then we go to the middle really, and there we have Marit van Lente, whom you probably all know by now. Marit is the president of MSF Holland and has been a board member since January 2019. She's also the chair of the OCA Council and is a member of the International Board, the IB. So those were the board members that we have here in the studio today, but luckily we also have the rest of our board joining via Skype, since not everyone could be here in person, but we're very happy to have them over Skype. So we will just briefly go over to Skype right now and see if they are ready to join us. And I already see them. Let me see if they can hear us. Yes. Let me see. Uni and Peter, can you hear us? They can. Uni can. Okay, well, on the left side of your screen, we have Uni Karunakara, one of our board members. He has been in the board for quite a long time, since 2015, and he is now also our representative in the MSF-SARA board. Then on the right side of the screen, you see Peter Drijsma. Peter is our co-opted board member and has been in the MSF Holland board since 2017 and has also been a member of the Audit and Risk Committee. Our 10th and final board member is Santosh Kumar, who unfortunately couldn't join via Skype right now, but will join in later for the session. He is very busy actually with the COVID response in India, in Mumbai. Well, we'll see him later today, but Santosh has been a board member since February of this year and is our representative from the MSF-SARA board. So with that, we've introduced all of the 10 board members. Thank you so much for joining. We will definitely come back to you later at this GA, but at least now the members know who the members of their board are. And that also brings us to our next topic for today, and that is the introduction of the Motions and Voting Committee. Because as you may know, normally we always choose the Motions and Voting Committee at the start of the GA. So actually at the day itself, and we just ask to all the members present there who wants to be a member of the Motions and Voting Committee. Well, this year, of course, everything was a bit different, so we also had to anticipate on how to choose the members of these very important committees. So what we chose to do is to elect the members prior to the GA. So we sent out an email to you, I think it was the half of May, so mid-May somewhere, and we asked to the members who wants to join these committees. Well, luckily we got many responses, so thank you very much for that. And we were happy to appoint two members to the voting committee, and Michelle Vargas as chair, and one of our members to the motions committee, and Nora Cornelissen as representative from the board. So perhaps let me briefly explain here what the purpose of these two committees is, and I'll start with the Motions Committee, because normally the Motions Committee is there present at the GA to help members with upcoming motions. So if you're here at the GA and you want to prepare a motion, then you have the Motions Committee there to help you draft one. What we decided this year is to pull it up a bit to the front. So we told you as a member to submit your motions prior to the 21st of May, and then we would have the Motions Committee ready to help you draft the motions. However, we did not have any motions coming in before the 21st of May, so the Motions Committee hasn't been able to help draft any motions, but I did want to mention them here and thank them very much. So Nora Cornelissen, our board member, who was a member, and Bakhtiar Florist, who also joined our Motions Committee. And that brings me to the other committee, who have been very active, and I would like to give the floor to Michelle as chair of the Voting Committee to explain to you a bit more what the Voting Committee is all about and what you've been doing over the past few weeks.
Thank you, Margriet. The Voting Committee is a pretty simple, straightforward committee, because we make sure the voting takes place in the way how our statutes and bylaws are prescribing it, which basically means we count the votes, and because it's electronic voting, the system helps us a lot. What we did in the last weeks was making sure that the different ballots were worded in the right way, that we have it in the system, and we made a check on whether all the members who can vote are in the system and got their credentials to do the voting. So that's what we do. In principle, it's very straightforward. We count the votes at the end. That will be later today. But there's one thing people should realize: in our bylaws we have an arrangement that the people who work for this office can never have the majority vote. So we also make sure that with the voting, that those who are not in the labor service of MSF but are volunteers in the association or in the field work, they always make the majority of the vote. So we have to make sure that that division is correct. And then we make a final protocol where we establish how the voting ended. And it will be the votes on the motions you already explained, but of course also very interesting who will become the new board members. And that's all we're going to do today.
Absolutely.
There are two members next to me. I'm the chair, and then we have Zahed Islam, who is a member of the committee, and James Bott. And the three of us have been all virtual by mail, responding to your questions to make sure we did the preparations. And we feel very well prepared for today.
That is great to hear. And Zahed and James, if you're watching, thank you so much for your work already. I think you've done a great job so far. And it's good to hear that the voting committee is confident in our voting system. Great. Okay, well then the next topic on the GA agenda are the board elections. So we will have our board candidates coming over right now. But first I will briefly explain to you what the board elections are all about. So as I explained to you earlier, and hopefully you've also seen in the mail, the board this year opened 2 board vacancies, and they opened one medical vacancy and one HR related vacancy. So they were looking for those sort of expertises within their board. 3 people applied, so we're very happy to have 3 board candidates. And basically you can vote for any of them. So because we have 2 board vacancies, you can also have a maximum of 2 votes. And you can of course also choose to just cast 1 vote or to abstain from voting at all, but it's good to mention that you have 2 votes you can choose for 2 members. And with that, I would like to introduce the board candidates to you. 2 of the board candidates are here with us in the office today, and one of the candidates is joining us via Skype from Barcelona. So sitting here next to me is Tessa Theadens, who is running for re-election. Thank you so much for being here. And we also have Ilse Broek, who is also running for board candidates, and thank you so much for joining us here in the office. And then we will also go over to Skype, and I first have to connect with Els, which I will do right now. There we have Els. So let me just check if she can hear us. Els, can you hear us?
Right now? I can.
Perfect. Well, we can hear you as well, and you're on the live stream right now. Thank you so much for joining as well via Skype.
Yes. Do I need a microphone or?
It's coming towards you right now.
Quite impressive. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the GA. My short introduction you might have found on the website as well, including my motivation letter. For the people who don't know me yet, I'm Tessa Theadens. I'm a tropical doctor and now in training to become a general practitioner. I joined MSF in 2013 and I did several very interesting missions. And after that, I picked up my life again in the Netherlands and decided that MSF, I still had a lot to contribute to MSF, and I stood for election for the board 3 years ago. It has been a very interesting time, the first term that I joined the board. It was a very steep learning curve as well, never having had worked at the office. I came straight from the field with like the dust from South Sudan still on my shoes, and suddenly I sat at the table with all these bright people and discussing all these big portfolios about the future of MSF. And it was really interesting for me to try to bring the field perspective to the table and the medical perspective. And I can actually say in the past 3 years, I really found that seat at the table. And I feel very comfortable and confident that my contribution that I bring is a unique one, and that our board composition is really becoming very strong in the past few years. And that is a strong motivation for me to continue for another 3 years. And I have the time and the enthusiasm and the time commitment to continue with what I started. And as I was introduced, I am now chair of the association committee. And that is really where my main motivation to join the board lies, because the associative nature of our organization and of our movement is what I really like about us. And I remember myself still being in the field that I felt very included in the discussions, and I like that associative nature of reflection and debate. And I really want to facilitate that for our members, and not just members that have been here for years or are in the office and know how it works, but especially for the newcomers or members who are in the field, who also really want to voice their opinions. So I would really want to continue to strengthen that associative nature and to facilitate that and form the bridge between the board and our members. One of the ways to do that is to, like last year, maybe you remember in the General Assembly, we called out to you, to the association, to see if there are enthusiastic members who want to join us in an association board. And in last year, we formed a board of a few very enthusiastic members, and we've been coming together and trying to prioritize topics for debate. And I would really like to continue with this group, with what we are working on. And I would also like to take this introduction actually to thank the association board for being so engaging and enthusiastic. I would actually like to call your names, and because I'm afraid to forget you, to forget anyone, I wrote your names down. But I know that you're watching, so thank you so much, Ali and Hugo, Wijbrand, Jelmer, Meerte, for being so committed and helping me also to feed into the board discussions. I hope I can count on your vote for another term for 3 years. And thank you so much. If you have any more questions, please let me know. We still have this morning, and hope to see you soon. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Tessa, very clear. Then we will go over to our second board candidate, Ilse Broek. Well, you also have some time to give us your pitch and tell us who you are and why you decided to apply for the board membership.
Well, thank you, Margaret. Thank you all members of the board for letting me be here. It's amazing to feel this MSF from inside again. And they're all out there. Welcome, hello, nice to meet you. I was very impressed by the speech of Tessa, and I think this is what makes me happy, that you are among those people who have so much to offer. And at least I have very impressive candidates. So if Tessa's chosen, I'm very happy with that. But that's, of course, not the right thing to say, because I should say you should elect me and those things. I think you should elect whatever. And I think we all have a heart for the case. So in the end, whoever will be here in the board, I'm confident it will be good. So that's for start. People probably don't know me because I've been out for MSF for a while already. It's more than a decade, actually. In brief, I was a tropical doctor working for different organizations, also MSF, of course, but also ICRC. Quite some detention experience and international humanitarian law, which I know that MSF is more interested in at these moments. Tropical doctor, then I became health advisor here in the office. Quite challenging, very rewarding, not easy, but it was a great time, and I still think very warmly back of those days. But life changes, babies grow in your belly, and it doesn't fit in the life anymore, and I became a GP. A rational decision. I'm happy as a general practitioner, but the passion I felt, I was in the field, especially South Sudan. But I guess that's I have in common with Tessa. South Sudan does something that people probably. I've been a general practitioner now for a while. I did stay in contact with the international medical world. It's SANO, which is a small organization in the Netherlands that supplies financial support to tropical doctors who work abroad. But MSF has always been under my skin, of course, as you all can imagine. And it took some years, but now I'm here, back to apply for a place in the board. I'm very, actually, yes, at the moment I'm a bit nervous about it. Because I've been out for a while, but I do think I do bring experience. I bring my personality. People who worked with me know what I think my good assets are. What I will bring to the board, well, first I have to learn. I have to have this steeping hopeful, this learning curve that Tessa mentioned as well. I do hope that I do bring my experience, not only with MSF, but much broader commitment to a broader medical view than just my own patients in my practice. So yeah, I'm very happy to be back, maybe for a short while, but it feels great to be here again. And but let's see what happens. That's it.
Thank you so much, Ilse. So now we will go back to our third board candidate, Els. We fixed the technical issues, hopefully. So she's back on Skype and she's ready to give us her pitch. We will do a very quick test with the sounding to make sure you can hear her, which is of course very important. But she's all set and ready. And in the meantime, I think you were absolutely right, Ilse, that we have three incredible candidates for the board. So whoever you choose, we will have a good question. Okay, we're getting a nod. So we have Els on. So Els, thank you again. I'm sorry for the technical problems earlier. So we are happy to have you on right now and to give your pitch. Thank you.
Thank you, Marguerite. Thank you, everyone else. I'm sorry about that. I hope everyone is well. And I'm very sorry I can't be there in person. So basically, I'm Els Niehaus. For those of you who don't know me, I joined MSF in 2014 as the Director of Resources, which included HR at the time. And HR has been my bread and butter since I started my career out in the early 90s as a head of HR for almost a decade. And as I said before, the principles of good HR have guided me throughout my career. Part of the reason why I actually want to stand for election was the strategic plan for OCA that we all vote for today, hopefully. Why I was impressed by that is its clarity and the real choices that we made. And from experience, I know that every word is weighed 10 times over. And do you still hear me or not? Yeah? Okay, cool. That's why I was extremely happy to read that we have dared to take a strong position on a number of items that we weren't too sure about a couple of years ago in my time. So I'll just name, diversity and inclusion, field-driven, which comes with consequences if you take a position in that area, and I feel that we are ready there. So, but not only that, items like climate change and mental health, I think it's very clear from the strategic plan where we are and that we have grown in that. And of course, associates not MSF Holland, but MSF Holland is there to support achieving those goals. Another reason is a bit more personal, and I think I speak for a lot of us that we all need to channel our emotions at things happening worldwide. The list is too long, and it culminates into sentiments of frustration and anger and disappointment. And I really need to sort of channel those emotions into sort of positive action in my mind, and look close to home for my contribution in doing what I'm good at. I don't take this lightly, to be honest. I've always had busy jobs. Since January, I have time to do this. I also know from experience that it is extremely important for the quality of the debate that board members have time to put into this, come prepared to meetings, and I would just like to say I'm committed to make this investment over the next couple of years. I am really excited about it. I'm looking forward to it. I thank my colleagues here who stand for election. I think it's great that we have 3 women here, and I wish everyone a lot of success. Thank you.
So much, Els. So I'm just hearing that we have a question coming in from for Ilse actually, which is of course also part of the GA. So if you have any questions for the board members, then you can also put them in the YouTube chat and we'll have them ready here to answer your questions. So what I'll do is just quickly go over to the question as we have it. Oh, it's actually a question from Elko Brubbelman, who used to be the assistant to the board. And he says, could Ilse say anything about what she would hope to focus on in the board? What would be her priority for MSF during her term?
I can speak now.
Yeah, we are switching cameras and then we will almost have you ready there.
Well, thank you for your question. I think, of course, medical issues, being a tropical doctor, master of public health, and a GP right now. But I do think that I'm very much interested in detention matters, as having an ICSC background as well. The international humanitarian law, they appeal a lot to me. So I'd like to focus on that. I'm very interested in ethical issues, working as a health advisor, and I remember that discussions on ethics, whether we could ask people to participate in documentaries and research. I always found it very difficult because the people were so dependent on us. So I know that the ethical issues still are inside me. And maybe, but now I must be very careful, because I'm new and I might step on some toes. I did notice that a lot of the reporting, I found it quite lengthy and a lot of jargon. So I would like to make our communication more accessible to many out of there who don't have a lot of time maybe, and come to the point a bit more quickly. But now I might be a bit more, I have to be a bit more careful because I do appreciate this beautiful reporting, but I found them quite, it took a long time to read them and have a good opinion on it. So maybe to come a bit more efficient, but I'm sorry if I say things that I should not have said.
No, I think you did a great job, and it's a really good question. And I think it's only fair to ask a question to the other two candidates as well. So what would be your priority for the next 3 years? And I know, Tessa, you already touched a little bit on this in your pitch, but perhaps if you could also reflect on it and to answer this question.
All right, yes, thank you, Elko, for the question. And indeed, as I mentioned before, my main priority is the associative life. Maybe to elaborate on that a little bit, it is I really want to focus on the MSF Holland Association, but being also your IGA, so the International General Assembly representative, I feel like I can really try to connect the dots between what is really the priority in our home association, and to really voice our opinions and our priorities in the broader movement. I managed to build a bit of a network there now, and I think it's important that we as MSF Holland also contribute to the international movement, big debates. And then touching the topics of the debates, the public institutional funding, revisiting of that debate, I think is a very important one for the coming months and years, probably. And also the growth and the future of MSF, so the MSF we want to become. It is really what Marit also mentioned in her opening. MSF is what we make of it, and I think we can do much more as MSF Holland to really bring together our thoughts. So my priority would be that, to facilitate that and to form that bridge between us and the broader movement. Yeah.
Thank you, Tessa. And then I will, of course, also ask a question to Els via Skype. We have Els on Skype right now. And I think you already heard the question, but again, what would be your priority for the next 3 years?
Yeah, I would obviously focus on the staff pillar and the ambitions as laid out in the strategic plan, but more concretely probably on staff care and culture, diversity and inclusion. So very much in the staff area, but also on associative life in the field, especially because I think one can't go without the other. If we want to have more diversity and inclusion, if we want to have equal representation in all roles at all levels, we need to also focus on associative life in the field. As Tessa, I think institutional funding and the general growth are important pillars. But I also know that I'd like to stick with my strengths. So the most attention would go to the staff.
Very clear. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of the board election section, really. So I want to thank all three board candidates, so Els via Skype and Ilse and Tessa here in the office. And that means you can cast your vote until 1 p.m. So please make a decision. You can cast a maximum of 2 votes. But you can also choose to opt for only one of these candidates, whatever you prefer. But please do so before 1 p.m. So thank you very much, Ilse, Tessa, and Els. And that brings us also to the next topic on our agenda. And that is for me to invite the president, our president of the MSF Holland Association, and that is Marit van Lente. She will now be joining us, and she has prepared her report morale, which is always the fixed item on the GA agenda on which the president looks back at the previous year. So we will now go over to Marit. Let me check if she's ready, and then we will listen to her report morale.
Well, I'll be as ready as ever, Marguerite. Thank you for introducing. Dear members, listen. Médecins Sans Frontières provides assistance to populations in distress, to victims of natural or man-made disaster, and to victims of armed conflict. They do so irrespective of race, religion, creed, or political conviction. Médecins Sans Frontières observes neutrality and impartiality in the name of universal medical ethics and the right to humanitarian assistance, and claims full and unhindered freedom in the exercise of its functions. You probably wonder why I read out the charter to you, but it is to see if we have really answered to our objectives this year. And when I looked at the past year, we, as MSF OCA, as MSF Holland, we've answered to the objectives of the association MSF in an amazing way through the work of all employees and volunteers. And I'll come back on the how, but first let me take you through the what. We've done what we have to do, helping people in distress areas and in crisis anywhere in the world. Our programs in Yemen, DRC, CAR, South Sudan, Syria, and others are core responses to disaster areas. In DRC, South Sudan, and CAR, we're providing aid to so many who suffer from long-lasting conflicts. And we nearly forget to mention these activities in our reports. It is so hard to bring them to the forefront. Hundreds of thousands of consultations, thousands of hospital admissions, community programs. Let us talk more about these programs and let's keep our focus on long-term crisis. Our medical activities in Al Hol and Ain Issa camp, to me, are the literal example of humanity. Both camps host some of the most vulnerable people, families who are allegedly associated with ISIS and third country nationals. The 10,000 plus people that live in these isolation camps, they're all women and children, with around 8,000 under the age of 18. The population is unable to leave the camp, unable to return home, and have no idea what their future holds, except for being stuck in the camp. They're dehumanized. Simply by being there, we've been able to help the women and children reassert some dignity, and we show that the women and children caught in this highly complex situation deserve to be treated with humanity. And a great deal of our work this year focused on migrants, refugees and displaced. One of our main responses towards refugees is in our operations in Bangladesh. One of the main challenges there for the Rohingya refugee camps is around prioritization, since the population size is about 1 million. The needs of the population keep ranging from access to safe drinking water to referral to tertiary care. And in this whole range of care provision, there are many gaps. Hence, we constantly question what we want to do ourselves and where we want to advocate for improved service delivery by others. In Libya, we worked in 3 detention centers amidst active conflict in Tripoli. And the overall situation was challenging, and desperation amongst the persons of concern is still high. Protection-wise, the detained population find themselves in the midst of a conflict with daily active fighting. COVID has made everything worse. Many official detention centers have emptied or closed, preventing us from accessing people in captivity. As Sacha Petiot wrote recently, COVID-19 is a real and actual threat, but the response can't be worse than the disease. This is particularly true for stranded migrants, further exposed to violence in the new context created by the pandemic, and with even fewer solutions to flee. In July 2019, our search and rescue activities on the central Mediterranean Sea relaunched. And in August 2019, it took 14 days since the first rescue to find a safe harbour to disembark. And whilst floating between Malta and Lampedusa, Italy, Ocean Viking had sailed in the shape of a heart to raise awareness. The message has gone viral in Italy and Spain, and 14 days after the first rescue, the Ocean Viking hosted 356 people could finally disembark in Malta. After many rescues and an intense collaboration, the partnership with SOS Mediterranean came to an end. We are determined to return to the Mediterranean as soon as possible to rescue the people who need our help now. And MSF came into action for the first time in the Netherlands for a group of 63 undocumented people left without shelter in Amsterdam. We supported Médecins du Monde and other organizations in Amsterdam such as Code Rood, Amsterdam City Right and het Wereldhuis. The project was small, but with a lot of help of employees and volunteers from the office, we could assist this group. And we also met with somebody who was rescued by the Aquarius and still remembered the name of the person pulling him from the water. Outbreaks. Since our inception 49 years ago, we've relentlessly fought against outbreaks of infectious diseases. And then the COVID-19 pandemic shook the world, including MSF. It has reached all our missions, and the work done to prepare our teams in the field for the outbreak have been astonishing. All structures in headquarters and field were turned upside down. No one could rely on flights, stock or staff rotation. However, guidelines were produced, new ways of communication were set up, charters were rented, and everybody just worked and worked round the clock. It has been, and still is, an intense period with an unknown disease at unprecedented scale. But all diseases still have devastating impact. In CAR, Chad and DRC, we've got an ongoing measles outbreak. The outbreaks are the worst since 2011, and we're providing vaccination, case management, but the outbreak keeps ravaging. In DRC, we responded to the Ebola outbreak, and 40 days after the last person tested negative and was discharged, a new Ebola case was confirmed in Beni. And in the last days, new outbreak of Ebola appeared in Bandaka as well, where an outbreak had been declared over. In Somali region, we had to respond to a cholera outbreak far away from our project location. And also our work in MDR-TB is positively influencing the life of patients. For example, in Sierra Leone, In the McKenney TB ward, it is the first centre in Sierra Leone that treats patients with MDR-TB with an ambulatory approach. The TB practical trial is trying to make the treatment even shorter and more effective. Malaria, HIV, Kala-Azar, Lassa fever. As association members, you know more about infectious diseases than you should in the 21st century. But as all drugs don't work anymore, we must keep investing in the treatment of these diseases and combat antimicrobial resistance. And in the last year, we've also seen the devastating effects that climate change has on the health of vulnerable populations. Following the effects of Cyclone Idai, we've responded in Mozambique with a short intervention. And we responded in Beledweyne in Somalia after floods, and to floods in Lankien in South Sudan. Logistically, these interventions are very challenging, and a lot has to be done by foot, and mobile clinics have to be set up to identify any risk for waterborne disease or potential outbreaks. The endurance of our staff is remarkable in these places. And this year marked quite some anniversaries. The 10-year anniversary of MSF support to the 400 bed in Lashkar in Afghanistan. 10 years of medical care of Kutupalong Hospital. The 10-year anniversary of the Haiti earthquake in 2010, which was followed by a national cholera outbreak. None of these anniversaries are happy ones, but it shows that we're still needed. And next month, it is 7 years ago that our colleagues from OCP, Richard, Romy and Philippe, were abducted in Kamango, North Kivu. However, we also managed to hand over things. In Ethiopia, our Tigray project in Hitsat's refugee camp, after 5 years offering mental health and psychiatric care services to mostly Eritrean refugees in the camp. In Iraq, after more than 3 years working in Sadiya and Jawala, MSF handed over activities to DOH. We finished the handover of the Raqqa project to the Kurdish health authorities, who are now running the hospital and former MSF health centers with our support in supply and financially. We have finalized the closure of our Talabiat project, where we donated a large stock to another organization who will make sure it will be donated to the actors who can hopefully still use it. But the major handover will be in Myanmar. In 2003, MSF started providing antiretroviral therapy in Yangon, as people living with HIV were highly stigmatized, and there was no treatment, no national program for that matter, available to these patients. By the end of this month, we will close our HIV project in Yangon. And after closing the first clinic, Insane Clinic, the second and last clinic, Taketa, will close when the last patient will be handed over to the Ministry of Health. Starting 3 years ago, the process of handover was carefully planned and executed, and so we can hand over 17,000 patients without overburdening the MOH. Not only do we provide medical care, we've been very active in our advocacy. On smaller scales in projects, to larger scales such as in Goma, DRC, where we managed with good evidence and lobbying to convince UN, the WFP and many NGOs that they should get out of Goma and provide aid deeper in North Kivu, exactly because that's where the conflict is. And the effect of this advocacy is incredible. We've been able to produce some magnificent productions for public advocacy, such as the film Surviving Noma, the co-production Yemen Unveiled, and the animation Give Me Hope on the Rohingyas in Bangladesh. 2 of these productions were selected for the WHO Film Festival and reached an incredible audience.
We are marching side by side. Some people have fallen, some people have died. Now we are.
With the help of our generous donors and supporters, we've been able to respond to our objectives. It's not all been easy. Governments have implemented increasing restrictive legislation to fight radical armed groups, referring to them as needed to counter terrorism. These laws hinder independent humanitarian aid. And in the Netherlands, we're very actively engaged in advocacy to stop the Senate accepting a similar law in the Netherlands. And in Nigeria and Syria, to name just some examples, we've been for years confronted with reduced access to population in dire needs, living in high insecure regions where states have criminalized some humanitarian and medical activities and personnel. MSF staff have been arrested in Syria, and military investigations into our activity have taken place in Nigeria, and non-state armed actors have attacked and kidnapped humanitarian workers. We have to face the fact that medical institutions are no longer respected by warring parties, and in fact they've become a deliberate target. We remember the incident in March 2019 whereby MSF-supported Al-Tawra Hospital in Taiz City was struck multiple times by errant shelling, and luckily nobody was injured or killed. In northwest Ethiopia, in Gambela, an ACF team was ambushed moving back from one of the refugee camps. 2 of their staff got shot and killed, and 1 was injured. And our MSF team, moving in convoy to the same refugee camp, arrived soon after the critical incident. In July 2019, a critical incident happened in the capital of Bangui, Kar, where several MSF staff were being held against their will at the Bureau of Security Officers, being accused of having helped a wanted person escape from the hospital. And the staff were released after some days, but it left questions to our acceptance. We had 2 critical incidents in the past months in South Kivu DRC, where MSF staff was taken. After intense work in both cases, it was possible to secure their safe return by our colleagues, but it shows that there's no respect for healthcare workers by some actors in this area. And the fighting in Pieri, South Sudan, took the life of one of our staff members, and 2 other MSF staff were wounded. In total, it's reported that as many as 200 or 300 people were killed in intercommunal fighting, and a similar amount of people severely wounded. And our staff, who often suffers from the same conflict and anxiety as our patients, they come in the morning to work in an iron shirt and to put on their white coat and care for those with wounds who won't heal, physically or mentally. And they listen. They listen to the stories of the patients. They listen. Do we listen to our staff? Do I listen? Do you listen? Many of us, current and former staff, have gone through horrific experience because of the work we do for MSF, for a single short period or for years and years. When we could provide actual help to the people in distress, that made us proud. It actually appealed to the very reason why we joined MSF. But sometimes we could not. Or we could not prevent that the suffering would continue for people we supported. Some of us, perhaps many of us, are experiencing moral injury and distress. We need to work as an organization to see the scale and extent of this injury. Who are these colleagues? Where are they? And how can we reach them and see what support they need? How can we listen? The latest example of racial injustice in the US has shaken the world, and many are protesting around the world. However, racial injustice and discrimination are present all around the world. And as I wrote to you last week, in MSF we also have not managed to tackle inequities and opportunities. We do not yet take the best of diversity and opinion, background and experience after 50 years of MSF. And a dear colleague of mine wrote last week. He says, "It looks like a joke, but some even try to make me believe humanitarianism is inborn for some and learned by others. I would never be surprised if a study proves how much shorter it takes for a Westerner to grow in the management position, considering education, personal characteristics and qualities, compared to an Asian or an African. Is this part of the MSF's being? Let's call for what it is: racism. The healing starts there. Do you listen?" I love this organization and the dedication that people display. I'm glad that 3 Europeans started 50 years ago MSF. MSF, these 3 letters, connect us today throughout the world. At the party that you just saw after the OCA Cafe last year, we were dancing. Dancing with people from Myanmar, Iraq, the US, from Afghanistan, Germany, Qatar, the Netherlands, and many more. 3 letters connected us, and MSF can be a vehicle for international understanding and solidarity. And those 3 letters can lift us up from our daily work to bring light to those who are suffering from malaria, from those who would have died if they did not get their TB treatment. Light for those who've suffered from the stigma of the disfigurement of their that Noma brought. And light for those who can live in conflict areas and under shelling. Let them bring light to those who work for us too. Let us decide together what we want MSF to be. And let us decide together how we manage and govern this organization. Let MSF be a truly global organization where the decisions are made by people irrespective of race, religion, creed, or political conviction. The possibility of change rests with and within each one of us, and it must begin with a commitment to safeguarding those who feel fearful and vulnerable within our own organization, in headquarters and in the field. To continue the conversation that we must have and to work to realize that we have a future together. We must listen to each other and we must act. I'm happy to share with you that the South Asia Regional Association has handed in the letter of intention to become a section. They have full support of MSF Holland and OCA, and we're working together in working groups to prepare sectionhood to be agreed in the International General Assembly of 2021. MSF Holland and OCA are strongly working together with the East Africa Regional Association, and we're furthering strengthening our ties with MSF Japan. And since I'm the chair of the OCA Council, we are also directly present in the IB. And all I can say, despite the tensions around the Resource Sharing Agreement 4, we are collaborating really well now. I'm actively involved in the process of the MSF we want to become. I'd like to thank a few people here and now, all our supporters and donors who make it possible to do what we do. Thank you. All our employees worldwide and the management team in particular. Nelke, Martje, Ollie, Melissa, Shekhar and Michaela, thank you. I would like to thank Martje van Nes especially for taking up an interim position after Frido Heerings left and leading the office through the COVID changes. I'd like to thank Sid Wong for his years in the MT, and I promised you last time I would thank Marcel Langenbach again. Thank you, Marcel. Thank you, my fellow board members, for the voluntary dedication that you give to MSF. And I want to pay a special thank you to Michel Farkas, who has spent so many hours safeguarding this organization. Thank you, Michel. And then Peter Drijsma, who unfortunately can't be here but is on Skype. He's our co-opted member, and he will leave the board after 3 years. His input to MSF, be it on governance, finance, the office move, it has been incredible. Peter, we will miss your open and critical feedback, and we will continue the insights you gave us. Thanks, Peter. And then a big and heartfelt thanks to our amazing association team, who've managed to make these virtual meetings rise to a new level. Thank you very much. We miss Violet in our association team as she gave birth to a lovely daughter, Emilia. And thank you all for watching. Thank you so much for working for MSF, staying connected to MSF, and feeding the valuable conversations we have. MSF is what we make of it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Marit. And let's leave an applause. There's a heartfelt applause from the audience here in the studio. So with that, we've reached the end of this first part of the General Assembly. So the time is going pretty fast, which means we now have a 15-minute break. And looking at the time, that means we will meet again at, well, let's say 20 past 11. So that's a little bit later than we initially planned, but that's fine. But do keep your live stream on so you can stretch your legs and grab a coffee. But as I mentioned, we have a little surprise for you, and we actually have Matthew Brady, our colleague from finance here, for a musical intermezzo. And from the members looking who are also here in the office, or who have been working here in the office and have been following the 930s, they already saw some of the performances of Matthew, which is really great. So again, there's a little bit of applause. So what we did is that we first have a pre-recorded video of Matthew and our colleague Violet, and after that we will go over here live to Matthew, and he will bring a song to you. So well, let's do that.
Hi everybody, I'm Violet.
And I'm Matt.
And we're part of the Amsterdam MSF Office Band. And we're just really thrilled and happy that we could be part of the GA this year. And happy to contribute to the conversations that are going on, not only within the organization, but in the world. The song that we're going to sing is by a lady called Assa, and she really drives a message to social injustices, which is the current conversation going on. The song is called Jailer, and if you listen very carefully, her main message that we take from this song is, as long as one of us is not free, then we're all not free. Yeah, 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 yeah. Whoa, 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 yeah. No, no, no. If I'm in chains, you're in chains too. I wear uniforms, but you wear uniforms too. I'm a prisoner, you're a prisoner too. Mr. Jailer, I have fears, you have fears too. I will die, but yourself will die too. Life is beautiful, don't you think so too, Mr. Jailer? I'm talking to you, Jailer. Stop calling me a prisoner. Let he who is without sin be the first to cast the stone, Mr. Jailer. Mr. Jailer, man, you suppress all my strategies, and you oppress every part of me. What you don't see, you're a victim too, Mr. Jailer. You don't care about my point of view, and if I die, another will work for you. So you treat me like a modern slave, Mr. Jailer. I'm talking to you, Jailer. Stop calling me a prisoner. Let he who is without sin be the first to cast the stone, Mr. Jailer. Mr. Jailer, man. Mr. Jailer, man. If you go on to the marketplace,
Don't throw stones.
'cause if you do, you just might hit one of your own. Life is not all about your policies all the time, so you better recognize your philosophies. Be good to your fellow man, Jailer. Stop calling me a prisoner. Let he who is without sin be the first to cast the stone, Mr. Jailer. I'm talking to you, Jailer. Stop calling me a development. Thank you.
Ready to go? Yeah. All right, welcome back, rock and rollers, from that short break. My name's Matt Brady. I'm from the MSF finance team. And you may recognize me from that last video. I want to give a big thank you to Violet, our association coordinator, for the great collaboration. And congratulations on the newest member of your family. Great. We've got time for one more song. Thanks for spending your break with me. I'd like to dedicate this song to all of the workers of MSF all over the world, from our field missions to those working in our partner sections in our offices here in Holland. This is really a challenging time of global pandemic, and it's a great moment to show our unity together. So thanks. Let's get started. This song is called A Tip of the Hat and a Bump of the Fist. Yes, and how many calls must a noble make before she can secure PPE? Yes, and how many calls must the ESO make before we're allowed to fly freely? Yes, and how many doctors' testimonials will it take before the world will look and finally see these maladies extend beyond borders, my friend? We're MSF united globally. We're MSF united globally. All right, and tip of our hats to our custodial staff around the world, keeping our workspaces clean, and a bump of our fist to our ICT friends that provide us with our connectivity, and most of all to our medical staff around the world, working front lines for our beneficiaries. These maladies extend beyond borders, my friend. We're MSF united globally. We're MSF united globally. Yeah. Thanks very much. Thanks for hanging out with us during this break. Thanks to our audience here in studio. Real nice having you. So continue your break. That's what I've got for you. And thanks very much, everybody.
Dat heb ik nodig.
Hi everyone and welcome back to the 2020 MSF Holland General Assembly. I hope you had some time to grab a drink, and I hope you're ready now for the second part of this General Assembly. And our next item on the agenda are the financial statements presented by our Treasurer, Michel Farkas. And Michel is all ready to present the financial statements to you, so we'll go over to you, Michel.
Thank you. Yes, this will be the presentation of the financial statements, also called the report of the Treasurer of the Board. Now, this report is of course about numbers and about financial data, and it's basically a reflection of 2019, and it can be a very sterile reflection if you bring it all back to numbers. But don't be mistaken, I want to reiterate again what already Marit said. These financial numbers are a reflection of the hard work done, of the commitment of our staff, the people who support us, the commitment but also the frustration sometimes in doing the work, and the amazing results we are producing. So don't get derailed by numbers. It is about something really different at the end of the day. It's also a bit of a difficult thing in the sense that you have to present in a very short time frame a lot of numbers, and I try to limit it as much as possible. It's the report of MSF Holland, but it's reflecting operations of the full OCA. And maybe a last remark, although the numbers in itself, and I will show you later, is a bit boring, the outcomes of this year are exactly what we expected at the start of the year, so that's the good news. The process to get there was far from boring, and I will say something about that later. It's not going to the next one. Can you do it? Yep. Thank you. So just as a summary, I want to talk you through the expenditure and the income of 2019, some remarks on the balance sheet, a little bit of what happened in the reserves, and especially linked to the bigger movement when it comes to our financial streams. A topic we have to address is the events after balance sheet, which is COVID-19, and then some basic reporting on the Remuneration Committee, the Audit Committee, and the report of PwC, our external auditor. And while I'm talking about these topics, I want to make sure I will address some of the important topics of last year. First, the financial highlights. That's the next slide. The next slide, please. The financial highlights, there it is. Thank you. First of all, probably the most important one, the expenditure for 2019. We have spent 254 million euros in our field operations last year, which was 10% more than 2018. If you look at the division, then the big chunks of money is going to Congo, South Sudan, Bangladesh, and the different countries Marit already mentioned in her rapport morale. But don't be mistaken, you also don't see some things here which were important for us last year, like our emergency responses in Somalia, in Mozambique for the cyclone. But there's also a part, for example, in our work we do on something totally different, like the TB Practical, a massive research program. And also Venezuela is in here with an opening of a mission with 4.3 million. It gives you some insight in how our portfolio is increasing and decreasing on the places where we think we should be. And if you bring it back to numbers, we have about 111 projects in 2019, of which 20 were new. And we were working in 31 countries, where of 18 of them we label as acute emergencies. And maybe another big number, if you look at our outpatient department of our patients, it's 2.4 million which we have been treating. Massive, massive numbers. If you then look at the next one, that's a bit about, so how much did we spend in total? If we spent 254 million operations, the total expenditure in MSF Holland was about 319 million. Again, big numbers. That was the 254 in the top line, you can see it probably on the screen, which I mentioned before. But there's also another one line here to mention, that's the second one, which says the grants to third parties. And third parties sounds like somebody else in MSF, which is not. This was our contribution to MSF OCP and MSF OCBA, because to make sure that they could run their operations last year. In the total movement of how the income streams were divided, OCA did pretty well with getting its money in and being prudent with how they spent it, but some other OCs had definitely some deficit to taken care of. And in the redistribution of money, we granted some money last year to OCBA, that was the start of 2019, and at the end of the year to OCP. I will come back to that a bit later when we talk about the resource sharing agreement, because that's where it all links to. Another grant to a third party, again, much more close to us than we think, is our money which we spent on MSF India to make sure that Sarah and the branch office are developing, hopefully to full sectionhood in the coming years. All the other costs are pretty much stable, so very much what I said, aligned in what we have been expecting. Now back to RSA. Last year we closed RSA 3. And RSA 3 is the resource sharing agreement. And basically the whole principle of the resource sharing agreement is that all the money we get in worldwide for MSF, we distribute in a fair manner on the different operational centers so everybody can make its choices where to do operations. And you're not too dependent on only the partners you are linked up to. And especially in the past for smaller sectors like OCBA and OCG, we only had 1 or 2 partners. It was always a problem to get a fair share of the bigger amount of money. So far, so good, you would say. That's a great idea in the movement. But it all boils down to how responsible people spend their money and how you work together in making sure that what the money you get from the whole movement is used in a way where you don't take too many risks or too many exceptions or expectations for the future. And that's why RSA is a bit difficult, because it's all based on future planning of fundraising and then deciding where to spend it. And that gave some problems in the movement at the end of last year, when we realized that 2 of the OCs had definitely spent their money as they were foreseeing and they were planning for in the future, but the income side was definitely lagging behind, leading to a big working capital challenge or a cash flow problem. And that was not about small numbers. For OCBA, MSF Spain, there was a 20 million cash flow deficit, and for France, 50 million. So the movement had to come together to figure out how to solve that. The good news is it was solved. The not so good news was it was massive discussions, fights, not always pleasant, and definitely it opened up or gave some insight how we have a different thinking about how we do our expenditure and income. You could almost compare it a little bit with the discussions our Minister of Foreign Affairs had, Wopke Hoekstra, in the European Union with COVID, where basically the Dutch said, we're not going to pick up your bill if you were not responsible in the past. And to a certain extent, it looks a bit how the divide in MSF was the same. Again, the good news is it was solved, and with the RSA 4, which I will give some highlights on later, I think it's also solved for the future. More important for us, I think, as Treasurer in MSF Holland/OCA is that we have a clear agreement in the movement that we cannot keep on being in deficit spending. We cannot spend more than we get in. So after the years of bringing down our reserves to the level we think is acceptable, now we're just going to spend what we have. It's living within our means. And I think that's important, especially now COVID is also influencing MSF. Maybe one remark here on all this support from the different sections. We gave to Spain about 11 million and France 8.6 million. In total, the support in the last 2 years was about almost 169 million, shifting between OCs to make sure that everybody had its fair share of the pie. That fair share of the pie is basically the whole thinking about RSA 4, the new resource sharing agreement. That one has been agreed, and basically there are 2 important starting points. One is all income coming in is for the whole of MSF. You cannot claim that your money is yours because you raised in your own home society, because we all are too clear that we're interdependent. And of course, in a lot of places, you communicate also about activities of other OCs because it works for your fundraising or your communication. The second thing we agreed upon is if you take the whole income together as the big pie, then how to divide it in percentages. And for OCA, approximately 23% of the full pie will be our level for expenditure in the coming years. That means with more income, the 23% in absolute numbers will be bigger, and with smaller income, it will decrease a bit. Clearly, it's also agreed that you have to solve your financial issues within that part of the pie. We are not going to easily accept anymore that there will be solidarity, so everybody spends, assuming that some of the others can pick up the bill. I think both are good improvements. But it all boils down to probably the third part, which we're still discussing, what's exactly the correct level of financial governance in the movement? And how do you make sure if people don't stick to agreements, that you don't get somehow forced to pick up the bill again? And that part is still to be decided. In the pie, there's one, for people who are really following the developments of the movement, there's one little piece missing, and that's our 6th operational center, Wakka. It's such a small number yet that you can't see it here, But in the next years, we have to figure out how also they get funded to make sure that they can grow as an operational center. In the indicators, if you just do it in percentages, so how much do we spend on programs, how much on support, how much on awareness raising and other support activities, then you see that most of the percentages have been pretty stable. The percentages I present here are the percentages what we call for according to the OCA key, meaning taking Germany, UK and Holland together. That's how the International Office looks at it. If you look to the MSF Holland statement, you see higher percentages because the overhead of Germany and the UK are not in there. But it basically shows that we approximately spend most of our money in direct programs or in program support, and that's where I think we should spend our money. Then on income streams, and especially on MSF Holland. The overall income in Holland has been the overall income for MSF Holland in total has been 291 million. That's all the money we got from other sections and what we did in the Dutch Society for Fundraising. If you look at the big chunks, and especially Germany has always been a big fundraiser, and they brought 96 million in. The UK is doing well. And fundraising in the Netherlands was 61.2 million, a small increase compared to the year before. And that small increase was last year mainly caused by a bit of higher inheritance and legacies. And the Dutch Postcode Lottery is also there for 13.5 million. These numbers sound big, and people always assume that, yeah, fundraise, we know how to do that. But I think it's a bit of an art, and I think we have not always given the right compliments or kudos to the people doing it. And especially I realized that when COVID happened, and you have to figure out what to do in a time frame that everybody is a bit uncertain about the future. And I realized two things. In the Netherlands, everywhere I went, there was a poster out there from MSF stating we are doing this together with nice phrases like war, natural disaster, pandemic. We are doing this together. No question about money, nothing about fundraising, but just showing out there that we are there and people know MSF is in Holland active. And I think these kind of very clever communication programs are as a basis or the core also getting to do the fundraising part. And I think that was a very clever way. And I've definitely assured that in the current level of our fundraising, which doesn't show any decrease yet, and I hope so it will not, this is the part of communication which is very helpful for that. So a lot of thanks to the communication fundraising team in the Netherlands. One small line here is also the institutional funding. Some of you will probably say, but hey, we stopped that. No, we only stopped institutional funding for the EU and its member states. This total zero PIF discussion is still ongoing. So the institutional funding which is presented here is Canada, Japan and the Global Fund. So indeed, no EU or the EU member state. The balance sheet. The balance sheet is basically a snapshot how our financial position is at the end of the year. And what to highlight here are some small numbers or small changes. If you look at the top line, it's about assets. You see that our assets has increased from a 28 to about a 30.5 million. That seems just a small difference of 2 million, but basically what's in there is the whole fact that we have a new building which has been totally prepared last year. We all got back to it, and all the costs are now somehow in this building where we're having the General Assembly today. And again, I think the shift to this building and how we have made sure that this building became a nice place to work in was a great achievement of the executive last year. The other one which you can see here is that we have a little bit of higher receivables. It's mainly receivables from other sections which we know we will get and has to come in. And the last number I would point out here is our cash. The cash has been decreasing fastly. That has partly to do with the fact that we have been paying 11 million to Spain. It has to do with the deficit we have in there and some of the investments in this building. In general terms, this balance sheet shows that we are a very healthy financial organization and that we are not too worried about the future, although I will come back to how COVID will work into these numbers. And just to give you an idea, sometimes also the value is not really shown in the sheet. For example, our building is for 22 million in the balance sheet, although we know that if we would sell it, it's almost 40 million worth. So there's a big overvalue there. That brings me to the total deficit of 2019. The deficit was 26.5 million. Now, for people not to get too worried about the 26.5 million, we agreed that almost 30 million was the acceptable loss. So we didn't spend all the money we were assuming for, and we're still managing around our reserve position of 5 months, which is what we say, the norm where we are getting nervous if it gets too low on that one. And our reserve position at this moment is 5.8 months at the end of the year. What is still in there is that we have to shift the 8.6 million to OCP. And then if you look at the reserves, you always make a difference. So what are the reserves for your business continuity you always want to have? And what are your free reserves you can decide upon to invest wisely or to use for other things? And if you take that division, our free reserves are 20.6 million. All the other reserves are then the buffer reserves or our continuity reserves. Then apart from the numbers, there is always some other information. One thing is HR. I already mentioned 111 projects in 31 countries and 10,500 people working for us. It's really amazing big numbers. We didn't change accounting policies apart from one difference. From this year onwards, the procurement unit costs are allocated to emergency aid and not to support anymore. That is an internal shift, but it has partly to do how the accounting in the movement works, and we are now aligned with all the other sections. And to make sure you can compare figures, we have adjusted the figures of last year in the same way. Then COVID. And COVID is an interesting question. The whole pandemic started in 2020. So why should you be discussing COVID in the 2019 accounts? But in accountancy, there's a basic rule. If something happens after balance sheet, what could influence the way how you look at your accounts, you should report upon it. And this part of the work has been, where I said, the less boring part of the process. There has been massive work done by people in finance to figure out what is the sensitivity analysis, how a pandemic as COVID-19 will affect our income, our expenditure, our balance position, our cash flow, and how to make sure that you can still report on going concern, meaning that you're pretty sure that in 12 months' time from now, you're still doing fine and you can able to fulfill your mission. That also means you have to start making assumptions about your fundraising in the Netherlands and in your partner sector, the sectors who are giving money to us, but not only for this year, also for next year. You have to figure out how fast can you move if things are deteriorating. Are you able to get some action plans in place and make other decisions? And how to make sure that your cash will be sufficient for funding what you are doing. In that process, people in the finance team, especially with part of the audit firm, have been looking to what we call a stress test. And we really went through scenarios. What happens if you have 10% less income, 35% less income, even up to 50%? And what happens if you take actions only in 1 month after that, or 3 months, or 5 months, or you don't take action? Now, I think it's not a big surprise if you have 50% no income or lower income and you take no action, that scenario will not work. But with all these calculations, we have seen that, first of all, the current results show that our decrease in income is so far not showing any deterioration. Not in Holland, but also, for example, definitely not in Germany. And Germany is an important funder of the OCA, as you have seen in the numbers. What we consider at this moment some kind of a worst case scenario is that we will see a 10% drop in income and we are not able to adjust anything in our expense base. That is the worst case scenario, and then we are still fine. And we still think that that scenario is very unlikely to happen. Partly because the executive has been working on a contingency plan and there's a pretty straightforward plan in place what we will do if the numbers are going in the wrong direction, what to do. And I think reading that 28 pages contingency plan, it's a pretty good school example on all the things you can think of, which buttons you have to push if your numbers are going in the wrong direction. And in that sense, from a board perspective, I'm very convinced that we will be able to respond to the COVID pandemic in a financial sound way. And it also means that we have convinced the auditors that we can report on a going concern, meaning we have no questions about our continuity in 12 months' time. With one, additional remark that yes, there is of course a non-material uncertainty for the future. COVID will have effect and we have to think and look at it. That brings me back to some last reports. First, the remuneration report. We always make clear how the directors have been paid and the board. The payments to the directors are all fully in line in what is acceptable in Holland and according to our own policies. I think also that in this sense the remuneration report for last year is not as interesting when it comes to salaries. The interesting part is the massive changeover in the MT. We have seen a change in delegate director, we have a change in the direct resources,
the medical director and the director operations. For a bit of continuity perspective, we're very happy that we were able to extend Nelke's contract for 3 years, because I think this turnover was enough for this time. And I'm happy Nelke is also willing to lead us for another 3 years. On board level, we have the remuneration of the president. We always disclose that. Marit gets a payment not for the work she does for MSF Holland, but for the work she does for the international movement and for OCA. And that's in line with the policy we have. And therefore also here it's disclosed. Then there's also a part on what has the audit committee been doing in the last year. Basically, we did all the basic stuff, what we should be doing. We checked the budget and we looked at depletion. We made sure that the RSA discussions were going in the right direction. We do internal audits and external audits, and the audit committee makes sure we follow up on it. And I think we had some specific topics where we looked into. One was the whole refurbishing of this office, what we also as known as the connected program of projects, where Peter Draasma and myself were the oversight committee from the board, making sure it works well. We also said it at that time, but we think that the way how this was done was from a financial perspective sound. There was a small overshoot of the budget, but that was linked to market circumstances, how to get your construction firms contracted. But in general terms, the overshoot was very limited, and that's normally totally different than you would see in these kind of big projects. So well done. The other one we looked into, and that's a bit more serious issue we think we should keep on our own, is our supply issue. Last year we changed our system from in the Magnum product to Dynamics, and I think in that sense we have built a sound basis to get our supply and the way how we manage it in the correct way for the future. But during the last 6 months we have seen a deterioration in delivery reliability. There were some issues with stocks, also some issues with releases of Dynamics which hampered the process, and that meant that in the end of last year the executive had to put a task force together to make sure that we are going to choose how to solve it. Sometimes this means redirecting goods to other missions, sometimes it meant local purchase, sometimes it meant to rely on support from other sections to make sure we got the necessary drugs and medical equipment in the right place. That process is still ongoing, and this year it will partly be solved and hopefully fully solved at the end of the year by shifting to a different logistical service provider, which happened, I think, always in the process now, this month and next month. We also do oversight on the bigger programs and projects we do for improving the infrastructure of the organization. So I already mentioned Dynamics. At this moment in time, the audit committee has a close look on how the health information system is implemented and how the TB practical is progressing, and both we do that together with the medical committee, a nice way of having an interdisciplinary oversight. Last one to mention, although it was not just MSF Holland or OCA, but sometimes these big international projects also fail, and a decision had to be made internationally that the Symphony project would be stopped, which was a project in getting the one HR database worldwide for all MSF staff. And that decision to stop it after almost 8 or 9 years, if I remember correctly, was a loss of 16 million out of pocket for a project that didn't result in a working product. The last 2 pages are about PwC and how they have assessing MSF. In the auditor's report, it says, and that are more their remarks on how they look at the audit itself, say we still have concerns, and I am now talking on behalf of PwC, that the internal control systems of MSF are not keeping pace with how the organization has been growing and still is growing. That is already for the last 3-4 years a consistent remark from them, and a lot of work has been done, but still we are not there yet. Especially 2 topics the auditors would like to see a clear position on from MSF Holland. One is, how do you ensure that your financial expertise and knowledge and internal control knowledge is safeguarded or is embedded on the highest level of the MT in the director's positions? And the second one is, how do you define in your internal control framework what your ambition levels are? So what are you expecting if you say 0 tolerance to fraud? What does that mean? What is your level there? What do you say about compliance to national staff regulations and compliance with local taxation and social security? What are your expectations about your IT controls and how do you work with that one? On these topics, a small team is working. Shekar and Thijs are in the lead on most of these topics, and we hope to get these answers finalized somewhere in the coming months. Having said that all, PwC came to, first of all, the most important conclusion: there's an unqualified opinion on the financial statements, and unqualified means that they've looked at everything and it's all fine. They don't want to make any qualification to it. That's where the word comes from. The second thing they said is, but there is of course this going concern statement which they agree with, also mentioning that there is a non-material uncertainty for the future, but in that sense our numbers don't have to be changed. It's all in there. And with these two remarks, I think that PwC has signed off on the 8th of June, and now as a board we are confident that we can offer this report to you as the General Assembly for approval. And I think that was it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michel. And for you watching at home, if you have any questions for Michel, then please put them in the chat. If you've watched the pre-GA session by Peter Whisker, then you are by now well prepared to ask critical questions. So please do so, and then we will come back to them at the Q&A. And while you do that, we will here start preparing for our next item on the agenda, which is the report by our executive, the General Director, Nelke Manders, and our Interim Delegate Director, Martje van Nes. And they will be joining me right now, and we have asked them to join us here at the General Assembly to tell us a bit more about how they have experienced the previous year. And of course, the General Assembly is a moment for you as members to talk to your board and to hold them accountable. But I think it's always very important also to have the experience and the insights from our executive, who are here in the office every day and have experienced the past year. So right next to me is our General Director, Nelke Manders. Thank you so much for joining again, I should say, because you were already here for the pre-GA session as well, which we were very happy to have you here then and now again. So thank you so much. And as I said, what we've asked you is to reflect back on the past year. So it's not an accountability moment, but we are really interested to hear your take on the previous year, what happened and what you thought were the most important things that happened. So if it's okay with you, then I would like to give the floor to you first, so you could address our members at the General Assembly.
Thank you, Marit. It's a pleasure to be here again, in the pre-GA and now in the real GA. And impressive to listen to the rapport moraal of that Marit did. To just hear back a year of what our colleagues have been doing. And then to listen to Michel, who makes figures accessible and alive. And I think for all of us, it's when we're listening to it, it's clear like it has been a challenging time, a busy year. And this is for me indeed a more informal moment, because the board indeed holds us accountable as executive throughout the year. So this is more the moment of the board to the association to indeed tell, like, okay, this is how we help the executive accountable. And I will not repeat what Marit already shared as an overview. That's a very sound overview. I will share a few words on our staff. 10,500 colleagues worldwide. And while we are talking, most of them are working hard. And I won't be able to do justice to what they are experiencing and what they are doing. And I just want to stress that we are all living a historical moment, a moment that will feature in our future history books, right? And if you just try to realize what that means for our staff, for our colleagues, it's pretty incredible. And so in the field, our colleagues, national staff worried, like all of us here, about family members, their own health, staff getting sick, having to cover for others, international staff who were end of contract, not being able to go home, to just continue, more uncertainties to manage, no other international staff being able to come in, problems with getting the supplies in. And Michelle already shared that we had already problems with supply. On top of it, the additional challenges that COVID brings. Procurement of PPE worldwide, of course, hampered. So when you are in the field, you have to deal with all that. And we are always proud how flexible, how agile our staff is. And I think it's worthwhile to just stress that we don't ask a lot. It's the humanitarian spirit that makes people do a lot. And there are limitations to what people can do. And we are stretched to the limit, having to make very difficult choices, very tough dilemmas to still have to make a choice. And I'm impressed to also see how the support here in the headquarters has been working with that. Duty of care, really difficult decisions to make. And our whole headquarters in the UK, in Germany, in Holland, but also if I look at India and Oman, when I talk with colleagues, they just share with me, like, it's like when you have had field experience, it's like working in the field. No more social life. Working around the clock, already for months, and more months to come. But also people, our colleagues that have never worked in the field, all of a sudden it's very normal that everyone just works around the clock 7 days a week, that you get a call at 10 o'clock as an ESO. Because you already had 10 field options for getting a flight to Bangladesh, but let's try an 11th one, because that seems to be an opportunity. And at the same time, you have to take care of kids at home, and incredible times. Association members worldwide, all of course, straight away thinking about what are we experiencing. We want to, with our humanitarian spirit, being MSF, we want to contribute. So I think beautiful to see in the movement that we let go of a lot of our existing mechanisms, having full trust in the capacity of all our MSF worldwide to do the right thing, but with the proper realization that we still are limited in our means, and that there is a distributive justice question, that there is limited PPE, and that those choices have to be made. So I'm super impressed, and at the same time, and maybe that's not what we want to hear now, concerned, because we are stretched. And it's not a normal situation. It will be in our history books. Another moment that might become in the history books of 2020 is are the protests that are going on worldwide, the anti-racism protests. And it's stirring a lot in our societies and also in MSF, and rightfully so. And I think that these two developments, a pandemic in 2020 and these protests, we have to, as MSF, still think through what this means for the future direction of the humanitarian sector and of MSF. We do see that some of, because we had just finalized our strategic plan, right, to set a dot on the horizon where we want to, that we want to work towards. And of course we need to review it with these developments. But I think that some of those areas that we, actually the majority of the areas that we expressed in the strategic plan that we think are super important for us to work towards, the big changes, developments, evolutions that we see for MSF OCA are actually amplified by the pandemic and by these protests. So what we see, for example, in the field, community engagement, empowerment of people. We see our colleagues doing it, and it is what is bringing an opportunity to also those people that, for example, don't have access to water to wash their hands all the time or to keep 1.5 meters distance, but empowering them with the right information and trying to be there, standing side by side, expressing solidarity. We see amplified the thought of becoming a truly global organization, to have our supply centers all in Europe. Well, we felt the pain. So to diversify our supply centers, for example, but also to really have a truly global leadership that represents us and brings in all the different perspectives and knowledge so that we make the right decisions. Extremely important, already in our strategic plan, just amplified. The protests that we now see in the streets, we have it featuring big and bold in our strategic plan. We want to address workforce injustice and workforce ineffectiveness. And those words by some are, they tell us like these words are not strong enough. But what we want is clearly featuring in a strategic plan, and big programs have already been started with Coalition of the Willing in MSF to work on diversity, equity and inclusion. And unfortunately, the pilots were about to start in the field. 4 to 6 missions were going to be the front runners in trying to see how we need to adapt our way of working, our systems, our procedures, our structures in the field, our field model, so that everyone has a good opportunity for development in the organization, for letting the voice being heard, for becoming, so that we will have the right person in the right job. That work is ongoing, and we now also have the conversations here internally to just stimulate that development, accelerate it, if you like. But you already hear, like, it is a lot. It is a lot that we ask from 10,500 people. And every time I want to reiterate, because we talk about the next step and how we want to adapt. And it's good to also hear the words of Marit, and I reiterate it, we are a beautiful organization. And we realize we can do better. And that's also what our colleagues tell us, we can do better. We have more in us than that we now use. And we will do better. So that's what we will focus on. And we will have to take care of each other. Because with our humanitarian spirit, we are without borders. I think everyone, including, I'm looking at board members, including board members, they invest much more time than you would normally expect from board members. Association members, our staff, everyone is doing utmost best. And we know there will be a price tag that we happily accept, but we also have to take care of ourselves and of each other. There is much more that I would like to share. I just want to again stress what Marit already beautifully shared in the overview of all our missions worldwide. But for me, indeed, was important that you mentioned Syria. 6 times since 2013 that we are rebuilding the mission, but dedicated. Our staff will not let go of having access to those people who need it most. True humanitarianism is expressed by being side by side with the 11,000 people in Al-Hol camp, for example. Sahara Libya, Marit already referred to it. We're persistent, but also doing a deep review on our operations on the Mediterranean to see whether that in this time is still the best possible project to address the underlying disease of countries blocking people out. And we had to be realistic, so we were extremely happy that we would be able to go back to Sudan, and our emergency team had everything prepared and the permits were in, which is an incredible performance. And then we had to agree to not do so because we are now stretched in this time to the limit. Working together with other OCs, we see it happening. So our colleagues that were then there, not starting a new mission, did work with OCBA for a while. You also see that as OCA, we are working very closely now with OCG, trying to see how we can do work more efficient. We've seen the birth of WACA, our movement is in development. All this is happening. So it is, I think, in the history books of MSF, also a historic time where 2020 will deserve more pages than average. And I know I only had 10 minutes to just share a little bit of that feel. And I'm happy that I was invited to do so. And I know that we're only a few of us here, but I still want to ask, maybe also from home, to just give an applause to 10,500 colleagues, all those volunteers, people supporting us. It's rather impressive and incredible. Keep on going, I would say.
Thank you so much, Nelke. And in the meantime, our second guest has also joined us, Interim Delegate Director Matje van Nes. And you're also here for the pre-GA sessions as well, so thank you so much for joining again. And Marit already mentioned it in her report morale, but you've only really just become the Delegate Director in the beginning of this year and the end of last year, if I'm correct. And even though we did ask you to look back at the previous year, at 2019, and pick out some of the highlights for you, luckily you were at MSF before, so you do know what has happened. And the same as with Nelke, we are very happy to have you here and to have you address our members at the General Assembly. So I would like to give the floor to you.
Thank you, Margriet. Well, as already mentioned, it feels a bit strange to talk about 2019 because 2019 feels history. But of course, I don't want to forget everything what has been done, and I'm really grateful how Marit expressed today what has been done in the field to Nelke, what impact it all has today on our lives, personal lives and working lives. So let me point out two topics were really specific focused on MSF Holland and in this office. And then let me talk about the bridge, what has been changed from 2019 till 2020. And what has been changed is, for example, the communication and fundraising part. And also I was very surprised in a positive way by Michelle pointing out one thing about awareness and communication in MSF Holland. So we didn't prepare it together, but my first slide is about that campaign. So that is a good start, I think. So let me share how that works. If you look back, it's good to measure some concrete results. And if you think of concrete results of 2019, then we always measure awareness. And awareness is the result of everything we are communicating about. So it's about how you are in the press, in the media. It's also about sending all the letters to our donors. It's about what is social media talking about. And that all together is measured by external agencies and says something about your awareness and communication. So last year, on average, we end with 21%. That is what you can see on the next slide. The average of 2019 was 21%. And if you make the bridge to 2020, then we saw directly that in March and April, and it will also be in May, that we have grown 2%. And that was concrete related to the campaign we did. And it would be good to say something about that campaign because Michel also pointed out we really did have a lot of discussion about it. Because the question was having such an incredibly strange situation also in the Netherlands with a lot of stress for everyone who lives here about being sick, having worries about families. And then we came, a worldwide medical organization, while people might have think, where are you now here in the Netherlands? So we felt it was a bit of risk, and at the same time we knew we had something to tell and we knew we had something to support. So how to do that? And that ends up in this campaign, and in the end it felt really well. So we did it online but also offline, and maybe you should think, why do we have those outdoor posters? Because we all need to stay at home. But of course the communication and fundraising team had thought about it very well and decided to focus on the supermarket, because still we need to go to the supermarket. So that is where you have seen it outside. Another example, also looking back in 2019, where you can see how our awareness is measured, is with press activities. We have seen the circle, the slide with the circle, and if you look at that, that is including the first part of 2020 to make it all round. But what you can see is most of the media attention was about Ocean Viking. And the colors green generally are about themes with migrants. So it was about Greece, etc. So, but what you also see for the beginning of 2020 is the blue part about COVID. So, and that is in the end the bridge to now where we are. We know that in 2019 we did have 50% more reach with our media than we had in 2018. And see how we start now with COVID and how well our message has been received till now. I think this is something where we can build on. So that is about the awareness part. Let me say also something about the fundraising part, building on what Michel already pointed out. The income from the fundraising part increased a bit with 2 million compared to 2018. Michel already has pointed out that this is due to legacy income, a bit also due to our current donors, our loyalty program, but we also have seen, of course, if you look into the total numbers, we have seen decreases. For example, with spontaneous gifts, it's very hard to foresee what spontaneous gift will be, and for example, also face-to-face. More important, as we are now, so I don't want to forget everything what has been done in 2019, but the big question is, what about 2020 in terms of fundraising, and much more important, what about 21 and further? So let me share what we have seen till now. Also repeating already Michel with seeing that till now we are doing well. The fact that we are doing well is with thanks to a couple of things. In the first place, that we had for the first time in history the opportunity to raise earmarked funds. Although this is in the broadest sense of the word, we can raise funds especially for COVID-related activities. And again, it is not earmarked in the sense raising for one country or for one specific project. It's much broader than that. But still, that gives us the opportunity to reach a much broader audience by asking them attention and support and money for the situation we are in. The other side is that we were forced to stop with our face-to-face fundraising, and that will have huge impact, not only for MSF Holland, because worldwide, as MSF, we rely very much on our individual donors, and one of the main channels to raise individual donors is face-to-face. So worldwide, we see that this will have a lot of impact. Not particularly this year, but the numbers we are missing now, we will see that back in the numbers next year. But how smart we did, we were looking for, okay, if face-to-face is something we cannot do, what can we do then differently? So we changed budget from face-to-face campaigning to telemarketing, phoning people at home, because everyone was at home the last months. So we have reached very good results with that. And that makes also that you can see how flexible you can be in executing your strategy. So from a strategic point of view, nothing particular has changed. We still have the same objectives, but how are you doing that? We have made some smart choices, and I really hope it will bring us a lot of more stability for the next years. So that is about the fundraising. Let me share with you, last but not least, something about the office where we are now. Because I realize that you as association members are not often in the office, but this is an important place where a lot of work is happening. So if you look back to 2019, it was the first year in this new office. And one of the highlights is that it is a fantastic office. It's light, it's fresh, it's new, it gives a lot of opportunities, but it is empty now. Too bad. What we also have learned from last year, and that is, I think, you can compare that with how it works if you move to another house. So if you move, you have your new fresh building and then you are settled, and then the next question is, okay, now we need to make it a house from your own. We need to decorate it, and you need to make choices about paintings and curtains and etc. And that is something we really need to focus on for next year. I think looking back, we didn't invest too much in that last year because we are busy with building and coming back to your new home. And that is really something we need to work on. We need to make this home our home in line with our identity. Another thing, what we have learned last year, what I have seen personally and where we need to work on also this year, is that it comes also together with having a new house. What kind of rules do you have? How are you going to live together? Because we have different rooms and different spaces, so how are we doing that? So for example, how do we work together? And moving back in this office was also based on the concept that we should be able to work flexible, to work in an agile way, and that is what this building is supporting. But that's a change, and we need to put more efforts to make that change together, and that is something we really need to work on this year. So having said all this, and then COVID came, and we were so busy with that office, and then COVID came, and something happened, and that is really, I think, important to address that. Something happened that we are make the change from an organization having a not working from home policy changed in one day to having a working from home policy. We need to stay at home from one day to the other. And thinking back, I think our great IT department has foreseen this because we invested so much in all the techniques and all the support programs. So we were at home from one to the other day. We had SharePoint, we had our laptops, we did have Microsoft 365. So it feels a bit like they have foreseen it. But what they did in 2019 was really make a big professionalization in our support. And I think that is definitely one of the reasons why in the end it went quite smooth. Talking about the office, so with being at home, with stuck at home, another big question came up. Not take care for the office, but take care for our staff in a different way than they did till now. So how was everyone doing? That was the most important question. So what we did 2 months ago is we sent a very small, to-the-point well-being survey to our office staff. I totally realized that we should do that to all our staff, but techniques make not everything possible at the same time. So we started with our office, sent those survey out to our office staff and just ask simply questions like, how are you doing? Do you feel supported? What do you need? So I can share with you some results about it, because in the end, I think the good part of it was that the majority, 85%, said, yes, I'm doing quite well. Not fantastic, but I'm okay. And then we ask, what are the main points where you are struggling with, and you see the green pillar, people are struggling with not being connected. And that is in a sense painful, because we all know that being connected is so important to be together. So we invested in office updates, in increasing 930s online and everything, but we know feeling disconnected, therefore you need each other. So it will be a huge challenge to see how we can improve that next month. And another last questions we asked in the survey was about, do you feel supported? Not only your workload, because Nelke already pointed out, we had to make tough choices. So what does that mean for your workload? And another question was, do you feel supported in your stress level? Because we know that people have to deal with different situations at home. And the answers on both questions was that our staff really felt supported. A vast majority really felt supported by their manager. And I think that is also really a huge effort we did, be able to support our staff. And of course, I know it is never enough and we definitely can do better. But in the end, this was a really good basis to build on. So having said this, I really have trust in the fact that we can make this and we can handle this the next months, because the situation is not over yet. We will repeat this survey, by the way, at the end of June. So let's see what will come out of there. But for now, having the situation we are in, I think we have everything in place to do everything we can. That is what I want to share with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Martje. We've also scheduled some time for members to ask you questions, and while you were talking, we had some questions coming in. We have 3 questions actually, and the first one is from Nelke. It's a question from Alijana Ramatullah, and he asks, what have we failed at in the past year, and what did we learn from our mistakes?
Ooh, good question. And as a human being, we're always interested in what can we do better. As MSF, I think particularly we are very good in that. So there's many areas actually where we failed, where we can do better. And I think we're already doing it. Michel pointed out one, and it feels like ages ago that I was discussing with my colleagues in the core XCOM the RSA 3 to RSA 4, the resources sharing agreement. And being an organization that is already rather diverse, you have a lot of different perspectives on how you look at money and accountability, and how what is an acceptable risk level that you can take. And it matters, right? It is about how do we ensure that we as an organization continue being able to take care of the people that are most vulnerable worldwide, that we want to assist. So it really matters. And I think some in the movement portrayed it as, and Michel even used that word, that we were fighting. I think and that is a failure, because I think what happened is that we had heated discussions because it matters. And the fact that we solved it and that we came with this redistribution of money, and to just have a focus on how to move forward and how to improve our financial governance, as Michel also shared, is one of the good things and the learnings, to just see very clearly, like, where with this size of an organization do we need to do better. I think in other area, and again, I struggle with the word failure, so it tells something about myself, right? But last year, when we did research with a group of general directors in the behaviors in our organization, we keep on stressing that we are a beautiful organization. We attract people worldwide that are value-driven, that do their utmost from a humanitarian spirit, and we are part and parcel of society. So there are also behaviors that don't fit our organization, and it's even worse when you talk about a value-driven organization. If there are behaviors that are in line with our values. We listen carefully to our staff and our senior national staff that we also invited to look at the results of that research, told us very clearly, like, absolutely it's important that we talk about sexual harassment and abuse, but first allow us at the table, give us a voice. It is about inclusion first, and then jointly we can address everything that we need to further address and to make our organization more beautiful. And this has been a voice that has been consistent in the association, if you look at motions, year in, year out. So that some of our staff perceive it as a failure of MSF that we have not yet addressed that properly, I can fully imagine. And I'm happy with the commitment that we have and the energy that we try to generate to now make those steps in adapting our organization for the better. I can continue. There are more areas where I think we did not as well as we should have. But I think what I try to tell all our colleagues, I also try to tell myself, we have to work with empathy. I think especially in this time, where the word time is loaded, because none of us have the luxury of time anymore. We cannot do everything well enough, perfect. Things go wrong, therefore, or words are said that are having another intention, and we are too stretched to not become angry when we hear it. So that might be a failure, but again, let us have empathy with ourselves and with each other, and try to, as this great organization, listen to each other, as Marit said many times. Keep on listening, try to understand. We jointly want to make this organization better, building on already the strength that we have.
Thank you so much, Nelke. I think it's a very good question. It's also a difficult question. We could probably host another session just about this topic, but you did a great job answering. The next question we have is for Martje. It's a question by Wijbrand Boon. It's about our staff. He asks, how do we make sure that we can take care of each other here in the office, but also during our missions or when you come back from a mission?
Wow, that is a big question.
I know, yeah, we don't have that much time.
Yeah.
It is a good question.
But I think it's an essential question, and it's the question we need to ask ourselves each day. It is also what Marit pointed out, what Nelke just pointed out. I think that is the question. How do we ensure? Ensure is also tough. I think asking the questions all day, what do we need to do and are we doing enough? Ensuring is a tough one. Nelke talked already about the duty of care. If you related it to the situation now, we also need to realize that we have different, well, we are all together, but we have different kinds of staff. We have the field staff, we have the office staff, we have a huge of different in backgrounds of people. Staff in the office do have specific needs and different needs than our field staff. So the answer is more in how do you ensure that you can support them. The answer is focused on how can you be tailor-made in your support. So that starts with asking, what do you need if you are in those kind of situation, and what do you need if you are working in the office? I think the answer depends, and it starts with asking. We did a small questionnaire in Amsterdam office. We will repeat that. We were preparing a very huge project, an engagement survey with asking people how can we support better and how should we do that. That is delayed due to COVID. But I think ensure that we can support better starts with asking and listening what need and act on that. And how you act will be different depending on where you are. But it's a big question. Maybe, Nelke, can you add something on it to have different views on it?
No, you say it very well, Martje, but maybe just also for the field. I'm really happy to see that our medical operational leadership has been organizing webinars amongst peer groups, medical team leaders, medical coordinators, project coordinators, head of missions, to also discuss with them in different sessions, how do you manage uncertainty? How do you take care of yourself? How do you take care of your staff? So there's been a lot of additional attention to just support our colleagues in supporting themselves and each other. Additional psychosocial care worldwide to all our teams, making it accessible through all communications in field, in headquarters, reminding people that also that professional support is there if needed. So it is rather impressive.
Thank you so much.
May I address one
final answer, Martje?
One final, because I think that what we realized, if you talk about psychosocial care, is that we realized that in the office we will not easily connect them because we think it's only for field and it's not, I can manage it and we will survive and I don't need it, while we were thinking you need it. So we need to ensure that it will be more easy to step in and more easy to ask for help, and that's not our nature. And I think that challenge, that's also the challenge we have now, and we need to find out how we can improve that and how to make it easy to ask for help, more than only a chair or a desk or a laptop because you are stuck at home. You know, that's a different kind of support.
But Martje, I think you got most of us meditating, doing
yoga. Yeah.
We learned a lot all.
Yeah. First steps are being made. Well, thank you so much for being here and for addressing our January Assembly. That really means a lot. So thank you so much. And that also brings us to our final item on the GA agenda, and that is addressing the board or asking your questions to the board. And that, of course, is perhaps the most vital part of any General Assembly, is for you as members to hold your board members accountable and to ask them questions about the previous year, also to make sure that you can have a well-informed vote. So that is what we will do now. I already saw lots of questions coming in at the YouTube chat, so that is really great, and thank you for that. And what we will do next is we have to do a bit of a move, so please bear with us, because we have the board sitting already at the stairs, at Meharba stairs. You can see them right now. And what I'll do is I'll grab my laptop and I'll walk over to them without tripping on any of the cables here.
Oh, no.
Okay, so there we are. And now, I'm not sure if I am in the right frame. I'll just go right over there and check if we have the setup right. And this is also the time when we go back to Skype. So we also have our 3 board members ready on Skype. And for our board members, just one more reminder to mute the live stream if you are on Skype. So that would be right now. And then if we have a green light from the camera crew, then we can start with the Q&A of our board members.
Over there.
Okay,
And
so I'm checking over and see if we have everything
right.
ready for the Q&A.
And this is also the time when we go back to Skype. So we also have our 3 board members ready on Skype. And for our board members, just one more reminder to mute the live stream if you are on Skype. So that would be...
Okay, so while we are figuring out the connection with Skype, perhaps we can already start with some of the questions for our board members that are ready here in the office. So again, for our board members on Skype, please mute any other sound, so make sure you have the live stream off, and then we will start with the Q&A. And I will mention to our board members on Skype when we have a question for you. But first we go to our board members here. And we actually have many questions coming in, so that is really great, and thank you for that. And the first question is to Michelle. There's actually a lot of questions to Michelle, so I hope you're ready. I think you did a great job. Or well, Peter Whiskert perhaps did a great job with explaining the financial statements. Okay, so the first question is by Wijbrand Boon, one of our association members, and he asks Michelle, how are we going to explain to the Dutch donors the new spreading of the nations to all sections?
Now, maybe first as a generic remark, it has always been very common in the movement that donations to sections have been spread on the OCs. So if you would be a German member in the German association, it was exactly the same thing. You give money to MSF Germany, and MSF Germany then gives it to the movement. In our way, how we do it internationally, it is part of, if people donate money to MSF, it's clear that they donate money to do operations. They don't spend money on the legal entity Holland. That's not how we phrase in our fundraising. And we make sure that when we shift money to, for example, Spain or France, what I talked about, that we identify their programs and projects where our money flows into, so we have also some accountability there. That's how it works. And then in the international level, it's an agreed, the international movement makes agreements where we are bound to, and there it's all covered in the RSA agreement and the IB oversight.
Very clear, thank you. Then let me see. We have several questions coming in for Marit. However, I think the first one is about responsible behavior. So please, if you want to direct it perhaps to Annemarie, that would also be fine. It's a question by Dirk van der Tak. And he asks, could you please explain what has been achieved in the last year in adherence to the framework for responsible behavior? Would that be something that you can comment on, Annemarie?
I think in our board report there is a paragraph on the responsible behavior. And I think what's important to note also in there is that the number of reports coming in actually dropped from the previous year, which is not necessarily a positive development. We also say there's work to do for people to actually be safe to report when they feel they're mistreated. So definitely that is something to note. In the developments, the work has been tried to do to get the responsible behavior framework under the attention is to include it in our training programs to make people more aware. And I think also Nelke mentioned it, that we bring that also to missions and try to bring it into implementation right there. And I think 3 persons of trust or confidence started in 2019. So they were trained and are actually receiving people, if needed, who want to talk about their situation and see what they can do, what roads they can travel to make their concern heard.
Thank you. Well, then we'll go back to another question for Michelle. This is a question by Wouter van Empelen. And he asks, is there a monitoring mechanism for ongoing monitoring deficits of the sections?
Yeah, there is already for a long time a monitoring mechanism on all the RSA agreements. Every RSA agreement had its own monitoring in place, and the FINDIR platform, the financial directors of the sections are looking into that. What the part of the financial governance in RSA 4 is still doing is there's a working group now think about, so what are the sanctions if you don't stick to the framework? And that's now the next discussion. And there I think there are 2 remarks to be made. One is, I still hope that we don't need sanctions in our own movement. There's a strange way of looking to each other, how you work together. And at the same time, there's always one, call it emergency button at the end. Every board has its own fiduciary responsibility. So if we think that for whatever reason we cannot comply to an agreement or we don't want to pick up the bill of others, then it's this board who can decide not to do that. It will immediately create other issues in the movement, for sure. But that's at the end of the day our own responsibility as the board of MSF Holland.
Thank you. Okay. Then we have a question that is for the whole board, really. But perhaps it's also good to go to Skype for this question. I'll ask it first, and then perhaps we can go over to Skype, or we'll start here. It's always a bit trial and error with these live streams. So this is a question about a topic that we've addressed at the GA, and we have 2 questions relating to one another, but I'll start with the first by Elko, and we can see whom of you feels ready to respond. And Elko says, most remarks about racism focused on the positive actions that can be taken, for example, inclusiveness. However, he says, how do we address more obvious examples of inequality and racism among colleagues and in hiring processes? Which is, of course, a very broad question, but I think it's a very, very good one to ask. So do any of you feel as if they could react to this or perhaps make a short statement?
I'll try to say something, but it's very much, I think, also a question to the executive. But I think the executive worked hard to provide leadership trainings to management staff, which should actually result also in knowing how to do, how to speak and how to actually listen to all kinds of people. And to actually be aware of implicit biases. So I can comment on that angle that the leadership trainings probably have contributed to it. On the other hand, the procedures probably need to be really checked and taken under investigation to see if there's more barriers to take out.
Thank you. And Marit, what?
Yeah, I think a lot of what we're talking about, and perhaps what Elko mentions, I don't know, is us living, is everybody living in a country where, so international staff going to countries where they don't live normally, living with many staff members that live there normally and live there in their society. And the way we interact in these teams and the way we live together, we work together, we share everything together, I think that is for me where two things can happen. Either you come really close to each other and it contributes to what I said, international understanding. If you live in a project in South Sudan with people from India, from Afghanistan, from hopefully from Russia soon, with a Dutch person there and two Congolese colleagues, and you live in South Sudan and you live with people that live there, it can either bring you together in the pressure or it can drive you apart. And I think what we've seen, and it's not the first time, but especially in the international teams, what you see is happening is after hours people start talking, like, where were you last on holiday? Have you ever been to Rome? Were you ever in Vienna? God, I was in New York last time. And these are for me the core parts that you can never address in a training, but that you can make people aware of. We can make people aware, national and international staff, of how it is. And one of the great examples I thought happened here last year in the office when we had a workshop for associative life in the field, where we had a game, and it's actually an MSF game, on all sorts of international jokes, on international ways of addressing things. What are common questions that you ask? And it was exhilarating to see that people in certain countries straight away ask, like, what do you actually earn? And in other countries they would never. We would laugh about each other's jokes. And it was as enriching for any of the associative life in the field staff as it was to anybody here in the office, to all of a sudden see that all of us have these ideas about what is normal, what is not normal. And we can take the positive value of living together in certain places together and learn from it and live it, or it can drive us apart. And I think this is what we have to address. And to make people aware, each one of us, national, international staff, is how we're fed by the place where we come from. So I think this is something that we have to address in the informal way. We have to address it in formal ways, that everybody gets training in how you actually hire and fire people, and how you're aware of your unconscious biases, and how we can provide that. There is a strong wish from OCA to work on that and really make things change.
Great, thank you. Then we actually have two more questions for Michelle, so maybe we just do those two first. The first question is by Ranish Seiben, and he has a question about the external auditor, about PricewaterhouseCoopers. And he asks, he says, we are working with PwC since 2012. Are they still a good match and adding value?
Good question. My answer, of course, would be yes. Otherwise, we would not propose to have them for another year. But it's also fair to say that with that next year, there will be a more in-depth evaluation, whether we should shift from both an audit partner and an audit office. I think over the last years, PwC has been very instrumental in pushing issues also in our internal functioning to improve, whether it was how we deal with our reliability of national staff, salaries and regulations in the past, as now on the issues on ambition levels of the internal controls. That is not always easy. I think I've been more involved with the auditors last year than I've been ever before, also discussing what we still think is appropriate and where we think they are just over asking us. But at the same time, I think it is their role to have that independent view on MSF, on MSF Holland, OCA, and to make sure we improve. The proposal which we put in our ballot is for 1 more year, and I think that next year we will all come back with another firm
or come back like we have to change the partner. But for the coming year, also part of the way where we now in the timelines, we would like to do another 12 months.
Clear, thank you. Then one more and final question for Michel. And this one is by Wouter van Eyck. Yeah, well, I think so. Then his question is, the 2008 crisis and following recession did not affect our income. Why do we now think that we will reduce 10%? And I think he's assuming to the COVID pandemic and the loss of incomes that we are experiencing there, or expecting there.
No, let's be clear. What we said in the presentation is that the worst case scenario, it's not the reality, but if things really go bad, we assume that there will be a 10% decrease for income. At this moment, no sign there. I think where this crisis is different than some of the other ones, and not always, but this one is one where the whole world is involved, and where nobody really knew when COVID started what it would do to the economic environment. And we know that worldwide there is less money in the global economy floating around. We know that big governments are shifting their money more to health programs than directly to other type of topics. We know that most governments have their budget depending on the gross national product, how much goes to overseas aid. So we will know there's money changes or flows or changes there. For MSF, we have always been pretty independent of it. But one of the things for me is remarkable, we opened this emergency fund for COVID, like we did with the tsunami years ago. The tsunami fund was immediately full and we had to stop fundraising to make sure that we didn't get overfunded. This time we assumed first 100 and 150 million to get in, and we are still not there. It's just slowly growing. So you can see that somehow the funding for these emergencies are not the same as maybe it used to be. In the current planning, that's the most likely scenario, not the worst case, we assume that we can stick to the annual planned budget as we had at the start of the year. So in that sense, that's the planning. But in worst case, we want to be prepared for a 10% reduced income.
Great, thank you, and a very good question. And with that, we have a couple of more questions, but these questions are for our board members on Skype. So we will try to connect to them, and I first will read the question out, and then we will make the connection with our board members. So the first question we have coming in is for our board member Peter Drijsma. And as Marit already explained, this is Peter's final year, or his final meeting really. He has been a board member for 3 years now, and he is our co-opted member, and that is also what the question is about. Because the question reads, Peter, as a co-opted member, how do you look back at your past 3 years as an MSF board member? Do you have any lessons or advice going forward? I think that's a great question, and as Marit already mentioned, it was great having Peter on the board, and he has had great advice so far, so I'm sure he can answer this question. So Peter, just one more moment, and then we will connect to you on Skype. So I have Skype now on. Okay.
Yes, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Yes,
okay.
Peter, we can hear you.
Yeah, my partner also called, what's the matter? But I'm trying to answer the question to you. Good morning to all. Well, this is my last contribution, I think, to MSF. What the question about lessons learned? Well, my interests in the board have been in the last 3 years about governance, finance, and more broad, the quality of the operational processes. And I think that it is important that for MSF in the future, a higher priority is put to the quality and monitoring of the operational processes as such. To explain this, Ilse said already something about reports. She found the report broad and not very focused. She was very careful mentioning it, but I think there is really truth in it. MSF is a medical organization, and if you look at the quality of the reports about medical quality and the achievement and accomplishments in the missions about medical standards, then that cannot be, then it hasn't the same level as the reports about the financial processes. And I think MSF should also account and be more open about the quality of the medical achievements. And that is also the case, in my opinion, for supply, the other operational processes. In many cases, MSF functions in missions for quite some time, and then you cannot explain a lack of monitoring on quality because it is an emergency organization. If you are 10 or more years in one mission, and of course you have changing situations and crises in those missions, but then you have also to work on a good account of what is realized in those missions. And for me, that is the most important message and answer on this question, Elko. I really hope that MSF will grow in giving more monitoring information about accomplishment in missions next to the financial information. Thank you. And I wish you all the best, of course.
Peter. We actually have one more question for Skype, so we will tune back to Skype in one moment. And that is a question from Marcella de Kraai. And it's similar to the question we just discussed about racial injustice. And she asks, what is the board really going to do about systematic racism within MSF? And I know we've already touched a little bit upon this here with the board members here present, but I do want to give you the opportunity as well to answer via Skype. So I'm just looking at the board members right now, but perhaps Uni, I'm seeing you're waving your hand. So, well, I'd like to give the floor to you.
So can you hear me? Yes. So I want to answer Marcella's and also Elko's question together. So racism, inequality, etc., cannot be. There are no technical fixes for these problems. The solutions are almost essentially political. So these are decisions you have to make. Different countries, different corporations, different organizations have tried all sorts of different ways to address racism, inequality in wherever they work or wherever they live. Some places they have positive discrimination, some places they talk about meritocracy, but all of these are skewed against people who have resources. So for example, when I first started with MSF 25 years ago, I worked with people who had no formal qualifications. They were truck drivers, they were carpenters, but they all had the quality that they could actually get things done in projects and in the field and wherever we worked. Today, because we focus so much on quality and so much on academic qualifications, a lot of the people who have the experience but who do not and cannot compete with people from certain countries because they have access to the best universities, they are able to get the degrees, they're very often at a disadvantage when it comes to hiring, etc. So these are political decisions we need to make as an organization to say that we are going to privilege certain kind of experiences over academic qualifications, etc. Right? That's one thing that executives and HR departments can really sit down and look at and see how can we privilege. And also we know that in Nordic countries where they have managed to reduce inequality in some levels in boardrooms, etc., you have to make decisions that certain percentage of board positions are going to be reserved for people from to create that diversity and inclusion at that level. And these sort of decisions would be unpopular in the short term, but in the long term, if you want to become much more equitable, equal organizations, then we need to take measures that are not popular now to sort of reap the rewards in the longer term. So we have to make some very difficult decisions which may not be popular now, but which will pay out, I feel, in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think, Santosh, you also wanted to comment on this. And let me first say welcome. Very happy that you could join. I know you're very busy. But I saw you raise a hand, so I assume you also want to comment to this question.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. First of all, hi to everyone out there in a GA. First time participating in a GA online, also in a GA outside my country. Like that, I'm actually a person from SAR Regional Association and the Vice President of the SARA board. Okay, regarding this, what we have is like that. Even regarding this. So we often find that even so much concept of the construct and concept of MSF itself comes from the West, and we always feel that debates are so much innate to us. But when it comes to this South Asian region or some other region which has been colonized before, what we find often is that it has been even right from the beginning of the education itself. It's an one-way communication going on every part of the society, so that even people cannot actually are not free to express their own ideas freely. So they often look at what they need to tell to the people by looking at the leaders, and they are just guessing what the leader might say, and it's the whole construct of the society itself is like that. So that even if you open a subject to a debate, people might not come that freely as we do in maybe in Europe or maybe in some other part of the world. So constraints are at different levels in different societies. So it's like inclusion might be to how to include, how to exercise inclusion in such societies must be. What I feel is that we need to be really innovative in maybe even holding a meeting, even holding a discussion, holding a debate. All these things are we might need to innovate in a way that people can express their ideas and thoughts freely in a different way. So it's not only the structural things or physical things which we see. It's also something which is so deep-rooted and culturally deep-rooted in some other parts of the world, which we might need to change, or we might need to innovate to become more inclusive. That's what my thought on this process. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Santosh, and thank you, Peter, Uni, and Santosh all for joining us via Skype. That has brought us to the end of the Q&A session, and that means I will now walk over to the other side of the room, to Marit, so just bear with me. Okay, everyone. So with the end of the Q&A, we have also reached the end of our General Assembly, the 2020 General Assembly of MSF Holland. First of all, I would like to thank you very much for watching and for participating. That really means a lot, you joining all on your Saturday off here to join us for our General Assembly. And I just want to give you one more reminder that we are going to close the voting. I know we are running a bit late. It's already 1 o'clock, so we'll give you 30 more minutes to cast your vote. So if you haven't voted yet, then please go to the to the e-voting system and make sure you cast your vote. I'm just looking at the camera right now, and my colleague is saying that the e-voting really closes at 1 p.m. So I'm guessing we are very strict today. So please make sure you have cast your vote. If not, if you're experiencing any technical issues, then please send us an email and we will work it out for you. And well, that was it from my side. So with that, I would like to give the floor to Marit.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. It has been the strangest General Assembly I've participated in. I know that our technical crew who's been watching the online chats, that you've been really active, really participative, asking a lot of questions. It's hard for us, we did not see that, so it feels really distant from you, but I'm extremely excited that you all watched on your free Saturday morning indeed. I cannot thank our technical team enough, the cameraman, the sound man, Toon and Daniel, for everything they've done here. We've set up a half-professional television company, and I think that has really made these pre-GA sessions and this GA better than ever. So thank you very much. But also Marguerite, Marieke, Diane, Mary, and Violet from home. I'm sure you participated as well, but thank you so much. The pre-GA, the most comment we got from the pre-GAs was, who's the presenter? So that's Marguerite, she's our board assistant. She's So Marguerite, thank you so much for everything. Thanks to the board, thanks to everybody, Nelke, Martje for being here, all at 1.5 meters distance, COVID-proof. Matthew, Ilse, it's been absolutely amazing. We hope you've enjoyed it for whatever it was. It was a strange GA. I hope you will remember this one, but actually it was really interactive, really good. Thank you for participating. Thank you for voting. And thank you for making MSF the way we want it to be. Thank you.